children's book was written by a man named Robert Wells. His intent in writing the book was to help children to see just how big the universe actually is. The book was entitled, "Is the Blue Whale the Biggest Thing That There Is?" Stating, indeed, the blue whale is not only the largest animal in the world, but its flippers and its tail are larger than almost any other animal on earth. The book goes on to say the blue whale, though, isn't nearly as big as a mountain. He said if you could take a jar big enough to hold 100 blue whales, you could put over 1 million of those jars inside of Mount Everest. He then says this, that Mount Everest isn't nearly as big as planet Earth. He says you could stack 100 Mount Everests on top of one another and it will just be a whisker on the face of planet Earth. But planet Earth isn't nearly as big as the sun. He says you can place 1 million planet Earths inside the sun. But then the sun isn't as large as the planet, the giant star Antares, claiming that 50 million suns would fit on this star Antares. But then Antares isn't nearly as large as the Milky Way galaxy, and the Milky Way galaxy isn't nearly as large as the universe, because the universe is expanding, empty but still expanding, getting bigger and bigger at a rate so fast it defies human calculations. And this vast expanding universe was simply spoken into existence by Creator God. Yet as incredible and thought-provoking as it is that God by fiat, He spoke and the earth became alive. The universe came into existence. What we find even more astounding than that in Psalm 139 is God's ultimate creation. Because what we see in Psalm 129 is that there's something more astounding than blue whales. There's something greater than the mountains and the earth, Antares, the ever-expanding universe with billions of galaxies. There's something greater and more centered than all of this creation. And that is the fact that not only is God a big God, but He's a small God. Because He's a personal God who cares deeply about you. We're going to take a couple of Sundays to go through Psalm 139, but I do think it will be a worthwhile journey for us because we find in this psalm God's greatest achievement. We find God's greatest miracle, and that's you and me. Please turn with me to Psalm 139. And again, it's going to take us a couple of weeks to walk through this. But the first point that we see in Psalm 139 in the first 6 verses is, number one, that God knows us intimately. He knows us intimately. In verse 1, we see He knows our core, the very center, the essence of who we are. Listen to what He says in verse 1. O Lord, David says, you have examined my heart, and you know everything about me. Well, this term examined means to dig. It means to pierce through something. It means to find something and dig that up. The idea is to uncover that which has been hidden, that which is not seen. Have any of you ever owned a metal detector? Y'all ever done that? It's kind of a cool thing. I've done it periodically. But what it is, is in its name, it's a metal detecting machine. And you can use it and scan an area, and if there is metal within a certain depth, the machine will beep or blip or squeak, and it will alert you to the fact that there is some kind of treasure there or some kind of metal. It's something that you may be looking for. And so you'll get a trowel and dig deep and then discover that which has been hidden. That's examined. David says, Lord, you've seen me as I really am. You know me with no layers. You've seen me with my mask off, no makeup on. You've seen me and you know me just as I am. You have examined me and you have dug deeply to find me, and you have uncovered the me nobody else can see. The core, the center, with X-ray vision, superhero vision. God sees right through the surface to the core of my being that no one else can see. Therefore, He knows all about me. Not just my core, but in verse 2, my contemplation. He says, you know when I sit down or stand up, you know my thoughts, even when I'm far away. In other words, this is actually one of the points that has captured me this week. As I've studied this, I can't quit thinking about that God literally knows every thought that comes into my mind. It's like every thought that enters my mind flashes a neon sign that God can read. Every thought I allow into processing, every thought into meditation, every thought that I allow myself to think about. And you know what it's helped me to do this week? It sounds like that I would feel that God is judge over me, and you better not think that thought. That's not been my experience at all this week. Instead, my experience has been, God, this thought. And I've been more aware of the presence of God just to say, get it away, instead of me having to turn away from it and make a big deal to reject it. It's been easier for me just to say, well, take it away. Does that make sense to you? I hope that it does. That's somewhat of a new experience for me spiritually, because the presence of God, you deal with it. Take it away. I don't even want to have to turn away from it. Just take it away. God knows every thought we think, shines a light that He can see, and probably more importantly than anything, He knows them before we think them. See, Point C, He knows our conduct. Verse 3, you see me when I travel and when I rest at home. You know everything I do. In the Hebrew, literally that's translated, you know all of my days. You know my days, all of them. You know everything about me, all of my days. You've been with me. Now think about that statement for a second. Because there are people in our lives who have known us a part of our days. There are people in your life maybe that you are friends with still that you went to high school with. And over the years those friends have known you for a lot of days, and those friends will know you differently than, say, the workers at your job, your co-workers, because they will only know you from your work time. And then your family will know you in an altogether different way because they will know you for a majority of your days. And so people know us at different levels, at different periods of time. They know that person. They know that person. They know this person. And God says, I know all about you. I know about your everyday. I was there before you created to bring creation to you. I know everything about you. All of your days. He goes on in verse 4. Not only our conduct, but our conversation. You knew this one was coming, didn't you? He knows everything I'm going to say, even before I say it. Now you think about this for just a second. Who knows how many people were on the planet in the days that David wrote this? You know everything I'm going to say even before I say it. Well, today there are nearly 8 billion people on planet Earth. Can you imagine keeping up with that record? Can you imagine having maybe 1 billion people at once praying to you in different languages, in different ways? Some prim and proper, speaking the authorized King James prayers, and others on their faces. They can't even form words. It's just grunts and sighs and uhs. And God knows every word, enunciated or not, of every heart cry. He is a great God. He is an overwhelming God. He is an overcoming God. But what blows David's mind, what really stirs him up and gets him going is not these other things. Despite the fact that God knows every created being and who has ever drawn a breath in that everything, all my days kind of way. Despite the fact that there are billions of people on this planet, David says, He chooses to follow with me. He chooses to hang with me. David says, He goes before me. He follows behind me. He keeps His hand of blessing on me. And David says, I just can't get over this. This thing blows my mind. With all that you have to do, being God, and all of these people on the planet, and yet you go before me. And you follow behind me. And you are my protector. And you are my provider. I celebrate the creation of God. I celebrate the magnificence and the majesty of God. I celebrate all that God has done and created in this expanding universe. But what means most to me is that He walks beside me. He goes before me. And He comes after me. Point 2, God seeks us individually. Let's take a moment to hear what David has to say about God's ability to follow us wherever we go. Listen, in verses 7 through 12 of Psalm 139, David writes these words, I can never escape from your spirit. I can't get away from your presence. If I go up to heaven, you're there. If I go down to the grave, you're there. If I ride the wings of the morning, if I dwell in the farthest oceans, even your hand will guide me and your strength will support me. I could ask the darkness to hide me and the light around me to become night, but even in darkness I can't hide from you. To you the night shines as bright as day. Darkness and light are the same to you. Now, to sum up what David is saying is, God, I know that there is no place, nowhere I can go to get away from you. You follow me. Now, I want to bring up something maybe a little bit difficult, so follow with me. I mean, it's not difficult to understand, but if you don't keep up point by point, it kind of will fall through the cracks. When you read this psalm, when I read that psalm, it almost sounded like David was saying, oh, I'm afraid. God, where can I hide from you? Where can I go to get away from you? God, I don't want this. Could I go up to the heavens? No, you're there. If I go down to the earth, no, you were there. If I go to the east, you're there. The west, you're there. But that's not at all what he's saying. That's not all his attitude. That's not all of his spirit. Because in the Hebrew syntax, the Hebrew language, the questions that he is asking in these verses are rhetorical. He's not expecting an answer. He's not wanting an answer. I think the best way to understand this section of this scripture from David's heart is to read this as if David were speaking sarcastically. Okay? That David is speaking in sarcasm. So listen to this if David is speaking to sarcasm. He's saying, Lord, I can never escape your spirit. I can't get away from your presence. I mean, if I went all the way up to heaven, you're there. If I go down to the grave, you're there. If I ride the wings of the morning, dwell on the furthest oceans, even your hand is there. Your strength will support me. I could ask darkness to hide me. Light would be around me. Even in darkness, I can't hide from you. God, I can't. You are there. Wherever I am, there, Lord, there you are. Your presence is with me. And the power of that reality in David's life caused him to tremble, caused him to just blow his mind. You are always with me. Reminded me of the story of the little boy in church, or at a church picnic. And when you, it was an old country picnic, and when you started down the serving line, there was a big barrel full of apples. And someone had written in an adult handwriting, only get one. And so, go down and begin, go through the line, get your apple, keep going to the end, and then at the very end of the line where the desserts were, there were a bunch of cookies, and there was another sign there, written in the hand of a child that said, get as many cookies as you want. God is watching the apples. He's always there. The wonder of God, the presence of God, the power of God, the support of God, the omnipotence of God. So what do we draw from David's experience and from David's truth here? These things. David saw God as, number one, a shadow that followed him. Number two, as a shelter that protected him. Number three, as a strength that enabled him to face life with assurance. The great man of God, Warren Wiersbe, once wrote, the safest place in the world for any of us to be is in the shadow of the Almighty.